Deep beneath the grand narratives of 17th century France, a singular, terrifying phantom haunts the annals of the Bastille. He was a man stripped of his name, his face, and his history, condemned to exist as a living shadow. No executioner's blade offered him the mercy of a swift end. Instead, his existence was systematically erased by the highest authorities in the land, his identity concealed beneath a suffocating shroud. Who was the prisoner whose mere face held enough power to threaten the sunlit glory of King Louis XIV? The absolute power of the French monarchy rested on a foundation of divine right and unquestioned authority, yet this nameless captive provoked an unprecedented level of royal paranoia. For over 3 decades, he was shuttled between the most secure fortresses in the kingdom, guarded by a hand-picked warden who answered directly to the crown. The meticulous secrecy surrounding his confinement suggests a person of immense political danger, a living secret that could not be killed, but absolutely could not be known. The journey of this enigmatic figure began in the remote, unforgiving Alpine fortress of Pignerol, far from the glittering courts of Paris. From there, he was moved to the garrison at Exiles, then to the island prison of Sainte Marguerite, and finally to the dreaded Bastille. At every step, the conditions of his transport were absolute. He was to be hidden from public view in a sealed carriage, and any attempt to communicate with the outside world would result in his immediate death. The man tasked with maintaining this draconian silence was Benigne d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars, a loyal and ambitious military officer who would spend his entire career tethered to this single faceless charge. Saint-Mars was no ordinary jailer. He was a trusted agent of the king's Minister of War. The warden's meticulous correspondence with his superiors survives today, offering a chilling glimpse into the mechanics of this state-sponsored vanishing act. According to preserved letters from the Marquis de Louvois, the Minister of War, Saint-Mars was instructed to provide the prisoner only with the barest necessities of life. The orders were explicit. The warden was to visit the cell only once a day to deliver food and water, and he was to listen to no complaints or conversation. If the captive attempted to speak of anything other than his immediate physical needs, Saint-Mars was commanded to run him through with a sword. This chilling mandate reveals the profound psychological weight of the imprisonment. The Crown did not merely want the man removed from society. They required his total psychological annihilation. To be denied a face is to be denied humanity, and the relentless enforcement of this anonymity transformed the captive into a blank canvas upon which history would project its wildest fears and grandest conspiracies. Unraveling this centuries-old enigma requires venturing into the labyrinth of theories that flourished long after the prisoner's death. The most famous of these narratives was popularized by the Enlightenment philosopher Voltaire, who was himself briefly imprisoned in the Bastille. Voltaire boldly claimed that the captive was none other than the older twin brother of Louis XIV, a legitimate heir whose existence was suppressed to prevent a devastating war of succession. Exploring the political stakes of such a scenario paints a picture of a monarchy terrified of its own shadow. A royal twin would have possessed an equal claim to the throne, instantly fracturing the loyalty of the nobility and plunging France into civil war. In this light, the decision to hide the brother rather than execute him appears as a twisted form of familial mercy wrapped in an act of supreme political survival. However, modern historical scrutiny casts significant doubt on Voltaire's sensational claim. Evidence suggests that the famous Iron Mask, the very symbol of the captive's torment, was likely an invention of later storytellers designed to heighten the drama. Official correspondence from Saint-Mars indicates the prisoner actually wore a mask of black velvet, reinforced with whalebone, worn primarily during transit or when outsiders were present in the prison. As the twin theory fades under the harsh light of archival evidence, other leading candidates step forward from the shadows of the era. The search for the man behind the velvet and whalebone requires examining the political enemies, disgraced servants, and foreign adversaries who crossed the path of the Sun King. One such candidate emerges from the spectacular downfall of Nicolas Fouquet, the incredibly wealthy and ambitious superintendent of finances. Fouquet had amassed a fortune that rivaled the king's, building a magnificent chateau that sparked intense royal jealousy. When Fouquet was suddenly arrested for embezzlement and treason in 1661, his vast network of spies, servants, and confidants was violently dismantled. The prevailing theory posits that the masked man was Eustache Dauger, a valet who was arrested under highly unusual circumstances in 1669. Dauger was not a nobleman, nor a military commander, yet his arrest warrant was signed directly by the king. He was sent to Pignerol with instructions that he was to be kept in absolute isolation, a level of security completely disproportionate to the status of a mere servant. The mystery deepens when analyzing Dauger's actual role. Historians speculate that as a valet, Dauger may have been privy to catastrophic secrets. Perhaps he had handled sensitive documents for Fouquet, or perhaps he knew the true identities of high-ranking traitors within the royal court. The Crown could not risk putting him on trial, where his testimony might become public, nor could they execute him without drawing unwanted attention to his knowledge. Yet another compelling figure in this historical lineup is Count Ercole Antonio Mattioli, an Italian diplomat who dared to double-cross the most powerful monarch in Europe. Mattioli was entrusted to negotiate the secret sale of the strategic fortress of Casale to France. But instead of honoring the covert agreement, Mattioli sold the secret to France's enemies, humiliating Louis XIV on the international stage. The geopolitical fallout of Mattioli's betrayal was severe. The public revelation of the secret treaty forced French troops to halt their advance, delaying expansionist ambitions in Italy. The king's vengeance was swift and entirely outside the bounds of international law. In a brazen, covert operation, French agents lured Mattioli to a secret meeting near the border, where he was abducted and vanished into the French prison system. For many years, Mattioli was considered the prime suspect for the masked prisoner. His crime was a direct insult to the king, and his status as a foreign diplomat meant his disappearance had to be fiercely guarded to avoid a diplomatic crisis. The theory aligns perfectly with the need for absolute secrecy, as revealing his presence in a French dungeon would have confirmed the Crown's illegal kidnapping. Despite the strong motive, the timeline of Mattioli's imprisonment presents critical flaws. Declassified records and prison logs indicate that Mattioli died in 1694 at the island prison of Sainte Marguerite. The man in the mask, however, was definitively transferred to the Bastille in 1698, accompanied by Saint-Mars. This discrepancy forces investigators to separate the fate of the treacherous Italian diplomat from the enduring myth of the faceless captive. The use of lettres de cachet, royal orders that allowed for indefinite imprisonment without trial or appeal, was the ultimate weapon of the French state. These letters bypassed all judicial oversight, granting the king the power to erase individuals from society with a single signature. The masked prisoner represents the terrifying extreme of this system, a man whose very identity was classified as a state secret, locked away in a bureaucratic black hole. The final chapter of this grim saga was written on November 19, 1703, when the nameless prisoner finally succumbed to illness within the walls of the Bastille. He was buried the following day in the parish cemetery of St. Paul. The parish register recorded his name as Marchioli, and his age as approximately 45, details that were almost certainly fabricated to obscure the truth, even in death. The extreme measures taken after his passing underscore the sheer terror he inspired in the establishment. According to accounts from the Bastille, his cell was immediately gutted. The walls were scraped bare and whitewashed, the floor tiles were ripped up and replaced, and all of his furniture and clothing were burned. The Crown was determined to ensure that no hidden message, no scratched initials, and no physical trace of his existence would ever be found. Long after the ashes of his belongings grew cold, the legend of the captive only expanded. proving that forced anonymity is the ultimate catalyst for myth. Unraveling the true story from the romanticized fiction is a monumental task, as generations of writers and historians have projected their own anxieties about power and justice onto that blank, masked visage. The legacy of this unknown man serves as a chilling monument to the dark side of absolute authority. It is a stark reminder of the lengths to which a government will go to protect its stability, utilizing isolation and psychological destruction as tools of statecraft. The prisoner's silence speaks volumes about the vulnerability of the individual when pitted against the crushing machinery of a paranoid regime. Today, despite centuries of rigorous historical investigation and the declassification of countless royal archives, the core secret remains fiercely guarded by the passage of time. The true name of the man who lived and died in the shadows of Pignerol, Sainte Marguerite, and the Bastille is lost to history. He is a ghost trapped forever within the very walls that sought to contain him. The enduring mystery of France's most famous captive is not simply a puzzle to be solved, but a profound reflection on the nature of identity and erasure. The man behind the iron mask, whether a disgraced servant holding explosive secrets or a tragic victim of royal vengeance, ultimately achieved an immortal notoriety that outlasted the very king who condemned him to oblivion. The grasp of the monarchy crumbled, but the phantom of the Bastille endures.